Hello, my name is Corey Mulligan. I am the author of this paper. I'm a digital marketing coordinator at Bluegrass Community and Technical College and student at Eastern Kentucky University. This presentation is kind of a shortened version of my paper for the Marketing 490 class. And the topic of it is social selling and the differences between Generation Z and Millennials. So what is the purpose of this study? Why look at Gen Z and Millennial? Well, first off, we need to figure out, do our perceived ideas of Gen Z and Millennials actually depict them? Second, how do these generations differ in their advertising and copy preferences? And lastly, how can companies better build their social selling to reach these audiences? Personally, I am a Gen Z, and I can tell you a lot of the times we lump together Gen Z and Millennials, or sometimes we hold harsher opinions of one, and that really varies from generations. I know Gen Z has a harsher view of baby boomers and Gen X than Millennials do. And so I really want to dig in deep on this and explore really some of the impacts that this has. So obviously, before we get too far into the subject, we need to look at the impact this generation group can carry. So on this slide here, you will see a breakdown by the generation in the current United States population. This is data from the United States Census Bureau, so it's a little outdated. It's 2019. Obviously, we're right now in the middle of a census, so this will be updated by whenever that data is released. So you can see that 47.8% of the population falls into Gen X and Baby Boomer, while 46.2% is considered Gen Z and Millennial. The breakdown there is that Gen Z makes up approximately 25.6% of that, and Millennials making up the other 20.6%, meaning that Gen Z kind of holds the larger part there. And we can also see that 6.1% is Generation Alpha, which we don't talk about a lot in this paper, mainly for the fact that they're going to be about max 10 years old. And studying children is not my cup of tea, and obviously they don't really carry much weight in the business world. They don't really have full-time jobs, so they're not going to be making a lot of purchases out there, so we didn't really look at them in this paper. Now, when we look at the overall impact, we can see that 52.3% of the United States population is under Gen X. So this is Millennial, this is Gen Z, and this is Generation Alpha. So they make up the majority, and that number is not going to be decreasing, it will increase. And that is something to keep in mind. Every day, baby boomers are dying. And every day, Generation Alpha is growing. So we need to keep that in the back of our mind when we're thinking about who we're marketing to and where our focus is, that baby boomer is soon going to be gone. I know, probably not in the next year, but on down the road. So next, we're going to look at workforce. And what we can see again, Generation Z and Millennials are the majority group. This isn't too surprising. Keep in mind that baby boomers are at the age that they are going to be looking at retirement. And Gen Z is still trying to enter the workforce. The youngest Gen Z is still only, maybe 11, and they're not going to be able to legally hold a job. So they are not able to enter that workforce. So that number is going to continue to grow, as is the number of Gen Alpha. Keep in mind, it's not that long we're going to start seeing Generation Alpha show up on this graph. And of course, baby boomers are slowly exiting the workforce as they near that age of retirement or death. So next up is the consumer units. This comes from the Consumer Expenditure Report by the United States Bureau of Labor Statistics. And it kind of looks at, the overall groups of expenditures. So let's just take a step forward. What is a consumer unit? That might help us. A consumer unit comprises either of all members of a particular household who are related by blood, marriage, adoption, or other legal arrangements, a person living alone or sharing a household with others, or living as a roomer in a private home or lodging house, or in a permanent living quarters in a hotel, motel, but they're financially independent, or two or more people living together who use their income to make joint expenditure decisions. Financial independence is kind of the key thing here, and is determined by three expense categories, and that is housing, food, and other living expenses. So to be considered financially independent, they need to at least two of those three need to be provided entirely by the respondent. So when we look at this, we're looking at percentage of people here that are completely financially independent. So Gen Z and Millennial, only 31%. Gen Z, still probably a majority of them are living with parents. I can't say for sure, but again, you look at that age group, we know that they're not as likely to be out on their own yet. So for raw data terms, Millennials and Gen Z make up 50,886,000 of the total 164,461,000 consumer units in the United States. So why are Gen Z and Millennials, we saw that they make up such a huge portion of our population. Why are they not spending as much? Why are they not out there buying? Well, to put it simply, I'm going to use a reference. It's a little bit of Gen Z humor. There's two friends and they're in the kitchen. So the first friend is over by the fridge and asks his buddy, hey, can I get some ice cream? The man says, yeah, only one spoonful though. Well, the friend pulls out a massively oversized spoon. What we are looking at here is kind of a situation like that. We make the assumption that, well, when we look at this population, these two are totally similar, right? If these are the total number of people, and this is total number of people here, then it should make sense that their income levels should be the same. That's not true. When we look at the income levels, Millennials and Gen Z bring in about $38 million a year, and that's pre-tax. Baby boomers and Gen Z bring in $79 million a year. That comes from that same consumer expenditure report. So it really makes sense that Gen X and baby boomers have this larger total consumer unit number because they have those higher paying jobs, because they've been in the workforce for a long time. Gen Z, remember, they're young. They make up a large amount of the workforce, but they're still young, so they're not going to be in those super high paying jobs yet. They're not going to be out there spending as much as these other groups. And if we want to look at some of the other primary things learned from this expenditure report, we know that Gen Z and Millennials tend to spend about $35 million a year on education, but only spend $33 million on entertainment. Now, we typically think that Gen Z and Millennials are more of that pleasure group. They're out there freely spending their money. We know that's not exactly true now. We know that education is almost just as important to them. On the flip side, we can see that Baby Boomer and Gen X spend about $71 million a year on education. And we know that they also spend almost $85 million on entertainment. So, why is this? Well, we could take a pretty good guess that this is because they are seeking a higher level of education. Now, I don't have raw data to back that up, besides from just general knowledge that most people in those higher level doctoral and graduate programs probably are going to fall in this category. They're also probably still paying off student loans, and they may be paying for their children to go to college. So we need to keep that in mind whenever we look at these numbers. And as for that entertainment, that nearly $85 million, again, retirement. These people have more time on their hands, so they can go out. They also are going to probably be holding higher job levels, so they may go golfing. They may have all kinds of fun stuff they do and that they pay for. So now let's get into the more research side. To summarize the research process, I created a simple survey. This survey was comprised of all kinds of questions, but typically they were binary or Likert scale, so it was easy to quantify down. And I asked all kinds of generations, ranging from baby boomer all the way down to Gen Z. I excluded Generation Alpha because, again, working with children brings up a lot of ethical concerns, and I did not want to have to deal in with that. But simply, we asked several questions, and the ones we're going to be going over on this section was all about identifying key aspects of the generations. So I compiled the results and then broke it out by generation. So these self-identifications are the answers provided by the corresponding generation. So this is what all of Gen Z said. This is about 208 of the respondents. To give you a rough idea of the breakdown, there was 365 respondents. Majority of those were Gen Z. Then it was Millennial. Then it was Gen X. And the least responding category was the baby boomers. This was not for lack of trying. I really did go out and try and meet some baby boomers, and I even went to my parents and said, hey, send this to all of your friends to get some of those baby boomers in there. But they were really hesitant in taking it. So let's go through here. So the first question asked was about the political scale they fall on. Are they more liberal or are they more conservative? Left-leaning, right-leaning? And I used a 1 to 5 scale on all of these. And I was surprised to say Gen Z said that they were almost completely politically liberal. Now, this does not mean all responses said that it was liberal. This is where majority responses from the survey fell. We did have some that said, oh, well, it's more likely to be left, or I'm more politically neutral. We did not have anyone say completely conservative. That was one key aspect from this was no Gen Z responded of the 208 said I am completely conservative. The next thing we looked at was fiscal responsibility. How well do they actually manage money? And surprisingly, they were honest. They said, I'm not really loose with my money, but I'm also not really tight. And they just said neutral. The next thing I really wanted to look at was how easy are they influenced? We often say that younger generations are easily influenced and swayed by maybe the person on YouTube or that influencer on Instagram. Well, they actually agreed. They said that they were more easily influenced by people. Now, this has a lot of implications because it means, in theory, selling to them will be a lot easier. The next question was cued by a certain phrase that kind of gets used by baby boomers, which is snowflake. Someone that is overly sensitive. And like a snowflake, it just takes a little bit to melt it. So I asked, hey, are you overly sensitive? Are you thick-skinned? Where do you fall? And really, they said they're neutral. I asked a couple people, and really they said depended on the situation. And I think that's kind of representative. We have, as a society, more social rules now. And these rules are better for society but are not as easily learned by older generations. Keep in mind, some of the things that older generations grew up with are now considered wrong when you look at gender roles and how those have changed. And so while back in baby boomer generation, it was okay to say that your wife should be at home tending the kids and have dinner on the table when you get back. But now, that's not the case. The female can be a breadwinner. It may not be a heterosexual couple. If the man's the breadwinner, what happens when there's two women? So as you can imagine, sensitivity is kind of hard to look at now. The next question was about orientation in time. This means, do they look towards the long term when they're planning with purchases or maybe even investments? Or do they look for short term and quick return? They are more short term oriented. Now, upon thinking about this for a while and pondering why are they more short term, we also have to look at what they grew up with. What they grew up with was a lot of financial stress on their parents. We have recessions, the housing one particularly. So we know that they might be more cautious towards moving to that. So they want to see those short-term oriented goals. Excuse me. So keep that in mind. Next was college. And while the research in this paper is really applicable to any industry, I am in the higher education industry, so I really was wanting to see how they were looking at college, because we know that Gen Z is now going to be entering the college field, and soon we're going to see Generation Alpha. So how are they looking towards it? So this question was phrased as this: do you look more towards a experience-based education or a college-based? And what this was asking was, do you think it is better to just enter the workforce straight out of high school, or is it better to go to college and get that education and then go out? Really, the answer was neutral, and I can see why. Some people have a really good experience. They go straight out of high school, get into work, and they move up the ranks. Others, they go to college and they have a successful career. So it makes sense that they're a little bit more neutral. They're not more pro, but they're not against it. We need to understand that. Then the next question was probably the age-old one, which is that, do they love their electronics? Do they hate public speaking? Are they more keen to use digital communications? Well, obviously now we're in the COVID era, so we know that everyone's kind of been forced to digital communications. But this question more asked, in general, if you had to talk to someone, would you prefer that digital mean, or would you prefer an in-person? Gen Z said that they completely prefer digital communication. No surprise there. But it wasn't as strong. It was the majority, but it wasn't the end-all be-all. This is what it is. We had people say they were more neutral. We had some people say, I lean towards it, but I'm not afraid of going to in-person. So now let's look at the millennials. So for the millennials, they said that they were more politically liberal, but not completely. They also identified as more fiscally responsible. This may be, again, they learned from their parents. They learned how they got through the recession. They see themselves as more neutral in influenceability, and they don't see themselves as more sensitive than not. They're also more neutral in time orientation. And they're more pro-college than they are in pro-experience. And while they're not completely for digital communication means, they do have a stronger preference for it. So let's look at some of the implications we can gather from this. We have to understand with Gen Z that the era they grew up in was very different from any past ones. A study done by the American Psychological Association did a survey with Gen Z, and results were kind of as we expected. 75% of the respondents of Gen Z reported having a fear about mass shootings. And when they were asked to report their mental health, 91% said they experienced at least one physical or emotional symptom due to stress in the past month alone. And this was back in 2018. COVID has made this stuff blow up. And of those 91% that said they had some kind of physical or emotional symptom due to stress, only 37% seek counseling. These generations have really grown to see dark times. There's been the most school shootings. Anytime you turn on the news, it feels like something bad is happening. They see hate crime. If they grew up not having white skin, they probably grew up fearing the police because there's been loads of hate crime in the world. And now, where we see ourselves in society today, we really can see it and the effects that it's starting to take. So, what does all this mean? First off, Gen Z has more of a love for socially responsible companies and products. We see that they're completely politically liberal, right? They're going to have a stronger affinity with companies that are engaging in activism, giving back to the community. So perhaps that could be a good starting place. Partner with your community. Now, I'm not necessarily saying go sponsor a Little League team. Maybe you need to start giving back to some local initiatives. You're a restaurant. Maybe look into partnering with a food bank. There's all kinds of things you can do. Probably the best, I would say, would be giving your employees a day, a week in the year to just go out and work with the community. It will really impact the community, and it will help build really great employees. Another great approach is to start implementing a triple bottom line, where you're looking at all kinds of ways and not just looking at profit. Another important thing to look at is influencers and market mavens. Gen Z said they're easily influenced. So you have to be careful when you're looking at this because you really don't want to be the marionette, right? Pulling the strings of these people. If you've ever seen the documentary The Social Dilemma, you will see how dangerous that can be. So be careful, but really utilize these influencers. Now, these influencers are on all kinds of platforms, Instagram primarily, TikTok, which is the new big one, Facebook, they're everywhere. But you need to be very, very careful in picking the influencer you want to work with. So a good example of this is someone by the name of Logan Paul. If you have not looked up, if you don't know Logan Paul, look him up. He is not particularly a great person. He worked with Disney, and he was in the YouTube partner or Google preferred program is how they call it. Basically, YouTube paid him. Ads were run on his channel, and for every view of the ad, he got so much money. It was a really good deal. He was very, very popular. But then he did something stupid. So what exactly did he do stupid? Well, if you don't know, there is a forest in Japan that is known as the Suicide Forest. It is a very dark place. It is where a lot of Japanese people and some non-Japanese go into Japan to commit suicide in this forest. He was filming some videos in that area of Japan. Even the town absolutely hated him that he was filming in because he was doing all these crazy antics. And so he was recording in the forest, which is kind of a no-no. Really, people in Japan aren't too keen on publicity in the forest because it's not a good place. And you're also told to stay on the path. He did neither. He went into this forest and he ended up finding a corpse and filmed said corpse. You don't have to know too much about his personality, but he is not a very serious person. And he posted this, and it blew up because he filmed a dead body. Now, he did not fully get the body in shot, but still, given his tone of comedy and personality, it was very insulting to Japan, to all kinds of people, because he was making light of suicide. In January 10th, he was dropped from Google's preferred program, which meant that he couldn't get paid for any advertising. Disney had harsh words because they weren't wanting association with him. And he took a month-long break. And we like to think that people learn from their mistakes, but he didn't. He took part in the Tide Pod Challenge. If you don't know what that is, people were eating Tide Pods. You know, the laundry detergent pods. And he also posted a video shooting 2 dead rats with a taser. YouTube tried to be a parent and scold him and suspended all ads on his account, but they restored them a couple weeks later. The fact is, how his antics reflected on YouTube was more negative. People and other YouTube stars were very, very negative towards companies that were associated with him. And those that chose not to take action really got some heat because by staying silent, they were confirming and saying that the behavior was fine. So please, if you choose to utilize influencers, be careful who you're associating your company with. Now let's move on to a little bit better of an option, which is don't be afraid to interact with Gen Z, right? We often think they're snowflakes, right? You know, Gen Z, they're these really easily offended group of people. They're not easily offended. They're offended by behavior that they grew up and they learned is not right. Now, does this mean that you are going to encounter someone that's very, very, very easy to make upset? You are going to encounter someone like that. You're going to encounter someone that may look male, and you use male pronouns, and that's not the pronouns they use, and they're going to get so upset with you. And that's where society is changing, and we just have to learn to keep up with it. So why are Gen Z more knowledgeable about these things? Well, they're one of the most diverse generations we've had. So really keep in mind that when you're catering to them, you're really helping society because you're making your company more diverse, which is essentially what this generation's all about. Now, when we look at that time orientation, we also need to keep in mind that they're probably not going to be looking at long-term stuff. So, offer short-term investment options. What if you don't have them? Well, explain how a long-term option can be an advantage. Maybe short-term is great, but if it's a long one, maybe you get more done. And if it is long, show how payment plans work. Show how, yes, this is 12 months, but the payments aren't as much as you think. Next is to show ROI. Again, they're short-term and they're a bit, neutral on their fiscal responsibility, but they really need to know what is my return on investment, and specifically in getting that college degree or certificate. So if you're in the higher education industry, this may mean using alumni videos. Where did they go after graduating? Are they working at a big company? Maybe they got a trade degree. How are they using that degree? Is their life better off? No, not everyone's is, let's be honest. But really, we know that a degree can get you so far, and work is what you need. So we need to show how a degree and a good work ethic can get you far. And last off, we need to meet them where they're most comfortable. Obviously, with COVID, we've been learning a lot about digital communication methods. So maybe have some online meetings, a virtual chat room, or a live AMA. That stands for Ask Me Anything. And don't stick to one platform. A lot of people now rush to Zoom, which is a great option, don't get me wrong. But Zoom is still relatively new. There's platforms that have been around for much longer that already have a base, particularly Discord. Discord is a chat room and video room, and it's a great option, and it's one a lot of this generation and millennial has been using. So keep that in mind whenever you're looking at those. So now let's talk about the millennials. Well, just like Gen Z, they care about corporate responsibility. So implement that triple bottom line, and it will help you connect with both these millennials and these Gen Zs. So really, it's a win-win. Now, they are more fiscally responsible, which means they're not going to be as fast to jump to a big purchase. So they're going to need to see that ROI. They want to know why they need to purchase what you're selling them. If you're selling them a loaf of bread that's $1 higher than the regular store brand, why is that bread better? This also kind of explains why organics has had their rise. Organic industry is a lot about why their product is better, is healthier than the non-organic version. It's all about giving a reason behind that cost difference, a reason behind why this brand is better than the other. And what if you have a service? Well, you need to show what savings they might get and what long-term investment will provide them. Now, just off that, millennials are going to be much more inclined to research before they go into a purchase. They're digital natives. They grew up in an era where technology was just starting around, and now they're an internet and phones are everywhere. And they have a huge database of reviews to go over, whether that's Amazon, blogs, you name it. They have cases, people, anywhere they go, they can find out about the product. So encourage posting of reviews because they're going to be looking. This means it's also going to be a whole lot more difficult to close a sale on your first interaction. And I can tell you, even though I'm Gen Z, I have some millennial tendencies. And one of the things that a lot of them don't like is being rushed. If you rush them, they're not going to be as happy, and they may choose to take their purchase elsewhere. So let them go at their own pace. They're going to be looking at those reviews. So it really just encourages you to make sure you're pushing out good stuff. And about that home pace, don't crowd them when they're looking around. Very few people enjoy being stalked by the salesperson in the store, but for millennials, they hate it. Same goes for online. Don't spam their email with constant remarketing attempts. To speak from personal experience, I actually bought a car not too long ago. And when I was looking at my options, I emailed about a car at a car lot. Turns out there was some issues with it, so I said, sorry, I'm not going to come look at it, but thank you for being nice and thank you for responding to me. For about the next 3 to 4 weeks, I got constant remarketing about, let us look at a car, here's this great car we think you'll like. And within the first couple, I did respond and simply said, hey, I know I'm in your software because I simply responded and sent you an email, but look, with my price range, there's nothing in here. Even with financing, I know I can't. So just please take me off. And they didn't. And I got remarketing after remarketing after remarketing. And really, it made me decide that if I was to ever purchase another car, because I already had purchased one at that point, I'm not going to that car lot because clearly they didn't listen to me. So really, don't rush them and don't overload them with constant remarketing attempts. So we talked about Gen Z and we talked about millennials, and we see they're very similar. Well, turns out there's a good reason why some people may have trouble figuring out. When I was initially setting the grounds for this research, I tried to find an age range for the different generations, and that was very, very difficult. Some people use years, some people use events. So I had rough dates set out, and it changed throughout. So if you really want to know, at the end, I will give my contact information if you want to look at the paper and look at the research. And you can see the date ranges I used. But there might be a good reason why researchers have trouble. Blurred generations are kind of an event that happen when people grow up in an era where things are very mushed, or when they're raised with parents that input their generation. So some of these I had to admittedly make up because there was no research on them. For example, a baby boomer and a Gen X. I guess that would be a Zoomer. Or Exennial. Exennial is one that has actually been quite studied. It's often called the Oregon Trail generation, and the reasoning behind this is because they played the game Oregon Trail in their school. That is the reasoning behind it. So, you have to look at these really weird events, but they noticed that these people were very different than Gen X and Millennial. They had similarities to both. And that's where what started as a joke became reality, and that's called Zillennial. Zillennial is the mixture of Millennial and Gen Z. Personally, I always thought I was a Millennial. And then when I started getting into research in college, I noticed I'm Gen Z, but I don't feel like a Gen Z. I'm not strong politically, not very easily influenced. And then I realized I had aspects of both. And online, I always hear people say, well, I'm a millennial, right? I grew up on the cusp of the 2000s. I personally am born in 1999. So I fall in a very weird category. An example of why this might be is because I grew up with parents that were both millennial, or actually, sorry, both Gen X and a baby boomer. My brother is technically millennial. So I am part and grew up with a mixture of all of these four generations. So the music I listened to when I was with my parents was from their generation. When I watched television, I was homeschooled for a bit of background. I would watch during the midday when I had break in school, was television from the millennial generation, from the 80s and 90s. And then when I played video games, I didn't have the newest systems, so I was still in that millennial era. Then as I grew and got on the internet, I started connecting with Gen Z. All of these mixed together to mold my generational experience. I wasn't firmly planted in Gen Z. I wasn't firmly planted in millennial. I was a zillennial. And we have to keep in mind some of the events they used to plan, these generations when they're doing these big studies, are very, very narrow. 9/11 is a prime example. Many people say that the cusp for Gen Z is 9/11. Well, I was born in 2001. Or sorry, I was born in 99, as I said. 9/11 happened in 2001. So I was not old. I was about 2 years old when that happened. And I have no memory of 9/11. And the reasoning is that they grew up in a world post 9/11. Well, I grew up post 9/11. And the experience I had wasn't that different. 9/11 never really affected my life. I never really flew, so I never really saw the increase in security. I didn't see a lot of hate crime against Muslims. The Middle East was something I grew up knowing about war, but I never had much of an impact on it. And if you didn't live in America, 9/11 probably didn't have much of an impact. Gen Z also lived through multiple presidencies. They lived through Bush Jr., Obama, and now Trump. And when we look at stuff like how their political views are, we know that they're more liberal. If you were to look at the presidents and their general the attitudes towards them, we know that 2/3 of them tend to be negative, and we know that those negative ones are typically of the Republican Party. So we know that they are more likely to fall in that liberal category. So the millennial experience grows. And we're now going to possibly see Zalpha, that Generation Z and Generation Alpha hybrid. And I think it's really going to be interesting because what this means is that we have a whole new subset of generations to study. And I guarantee one millennial is not the same as another because what they experienced growing up varies. Where they grew up will dictate how. So we need to keep that in mind. And technological advances is a huge thing. For me, for example, again, 99, I'm technically Gen Z. I grew up with a rotary phone. We had cassettes, VHS, and I fully remember learning cursive. And I remember when cell phones were bigger. I remember having a flip phone, a slide phone. This wasn't because I grew up in that technological era where that was common. No, it's just because income level, I didn't have the newest stuff. And I had the older generations. I can now think it is crazy that I have a virtual reality headset. That was something I grew up thinking was going to be something my grandkids had. So technology even influences all of this. Now, let's move on to the big question that this wants to study. Are we accurately determining how these generations act? So going back to my research, the first part we looked at was just the results that Gen Z said about Gen Z, and just Millennial said about Millennials. This is everything else. This is what Millennials, Gen X, and Baby Boomers said about Gen Z. So the underlined ones is where we had a difference. And Gen Z, well, the only real difference was time orientation. And we see that, for the most part, people thought they had neutral orientation. Now, remember back to when I was talking about those numbers, about my responses, how the most we had was Gen Z, then it was Millennial, then it was Gen X, then we had Baby Boomers. I would hazard to take a guess, and we'll look at this so you can take a guess. How much of an impact Millennials had on this? You see, we often say Millennials and Gen Z are very similar, if not the same. So it would make sense that Millennials may be more apt to say, yeah, Gen Z has more of a neutral time orientation like us. And that those other generations may not think that. Well, let's see. This is the results just of Gen X and baby boomers. There's a whole lot more underlines, which means a whole lot more differences. We can easily see they say Gen Z is more politically liberal. They see that there's more Republican, more conservativeness in them. They think they're more fiscally responsible, disagreeing with Gen Z. They think they're more neutrally influenceable, which Gen Z argues, no, we're more. They think they're more overly sensitive, which, again, isn't what Gen Z said. Gen Z said, we're not overly sensitive. They still think there's a neutral time orientation. And they also assume they're more pro-college. But they do agree on one thing. They're completely preferenced of digital communication. We often need to think about the ideas that Gen Z holds to boomers, to baby boomers and Gen X, and how those flip around. Baby boomers in particular seem to label Gen Z snowflakes. This is an idea, as I said, that these younger generations are way more sensitive, which we can see they believed. But that's not true. And Gen Z says it. And the reason is that the times they are a-changing. And for baby boomers, it's not been an easy change. So when they do something that is now socially not as acceptable, instead of taking the time to say, maybe I'm not right, they're more apt to just say, they're just being overly sensitive. And we've seen that reciprocated by Gen Z. The term boomer is used by Gen Z to indicate to baby boomers. Now, I can't say for sure if it's just an easy shortening of saying baby boomer, but typically someone's called a boomer when they hold those old ideas, the ones that aren't as true anymore. We also know pro-college may come at the fact that these two generations in question, Gen X and baby boomers, have kids. Or, well, majority do. So they may be more apt to want their Gen Z grandkids or kids to go to college and hope that they are indeed more apt to. So let's look at the millennials. How did Gen Z identify them? Those baby boomers and Gen X. Well, not as accurately as they did Gen Z. In fact, they don't think they're as fiscally responsible. They think they're a whole lot more easily influenced, and that they're more short-term oriented. These are very, very different. We can see that Gen Z, again, is trying to see some of millennial in them and think they're just like us, but they're not. So, how did the baby boomers and the Gen X view them? Well, we can see they had quite a hard time. We can see that while most of those said, they also said they're more thick-skinned. They're neutral towards college, and they're neutral towards communication mode. Those aren't true. So, they only have one that's accurate, just like when they tried to look at Gen Z. They aren't getting the full picture. Now, we do know that Gen X and baby boomer tend to have a harsher view on millennial. And I just want to say, I don't think there's any malice in this. I think every generation looks at the younger one and really holds them to a high standard. And when they don't meet that standard, they get disappointed. I think this is probably what's happening. Gen X and baby boomers always made jokes about millennials, whether it's avocado toast or not knowing what a book is. They just aren't meeting the expectations they set because the expectation is different now. You know, I always hear the joke about baby boomers say that, you know, millennials don't know what books are. There's always those comics of kids in a classroom with a book in front of them, and they say, I swipe and nothing happens. Kids know what books are, but we're now in a digital age where books aren't the only way of reading media. So there's been so much change and so much growth in the way we learn and the way we gather knowledge that it's hard to say one generation determines the path of the next because we don't know what the next couple of years bring. Of course, some baby boomers and Gen X just genuinely hate millennials for their actions. So let's talk about the next part, and that is generation slang. Slang can be kind of hard to define. Typically, it's just a word that has some form of meaning to that group. A prime example of an older bit would probably be groovy or radical. That's kind of older. And so I wanted to look at the younger generation slang. So I went about and I gathered a lot of slang words, 23, and I went to different generations and I said, here's the words. Can you tell me what they mean? Now, Gen Z knew all of them. Millennial knew majority of them. Gen X knew a very few, and Baby Boomer practically knew none of them. And I'm not going to go through all 23. It's in my appendix of the paper. Again, at the end, you will get my contact information if you want that paper. To go through a couple of them would be extra, and that means dramatic or over the top. To go off means to support a rant. If someone is salty, it means that they're bitter or they're holding a grudge. Tea, or to spill the tea, means gossip. To slay means to do well, or snatched means that they're fashionable, or even wig, which means amazing. So what exactly does this mean for us? Well, my big question to them was, this slang, if it was used in advertising, would you be positive to it, or would you be negative to it? Would you like it, or would you hate it? And everyone except for Gen X did not like it. Gen X said, well, I like it, but I wouldn't. It depends. And really what I found out was some of the words that have slang terms now had slang terms back in these older generations. For example, lit, L-I-T. For current generations, it means that something is cool or awesome. But for older generations, it means drunk or high. And so Gen X really said that they would feel as if it made them old, but they also still want to be in with it. So they don't want to be completely separated from it. I think, though, majority rules, everyone said it's negative. But this brought a question to my mind. Where did all this slang come from? Well, there's a really long-winded story about it, but I'll shorten it down to the best of my ability. My journey first brought me to drag an LGBTQ community. You see, Gen Z and Millennial are a lot more free in sexuality, not meaning that they're having sex everywhere, meaning that they're more comfortable coming out as gay, as lesbian, as bisexual, as transsexual, asexual, you name it. They're much more comfortable. And so they're more comfortable using slang that comes from that community. So I started asking around, particularly in the drag community, where did these terms come from? And I met a wonderful person and they said, oh, well, this isn't new. This isn't Gen Z. This isn't millennial. This is back from Gen X and baby boomer. You see, this comes from AAVE, which stands for African American Vernacular English, and the drag community. So these African American drag queens use these terms, and these terms are not new. These were back in the early years of it, back in Stonewall. And the reason they weren't popular, the reason they're only coming around now, is that that side of the community is more socially acceptable. We know there's TV shows like RuPaul's Drag Race, and drag is not as uncommon. Men in makeup is not uncommon. When we look at those ratings, we know that the PEW, the Pew Research Center, said that 72% of people today say that homosexuality should be accepted. Back in 1994, okay, not that big of a difference. 8 years, it was only 46%. And in 2002, that number was 51%. That 8-year difference there, 46% to 51%, and all the way up now to 72%. So we know that this is becoming more accepted. It's more okay to use. But that's why it found its home in these younger generations. These younger generations have that freedom, have that more acceptable ability to use those terms. So let's talk about now, well, Gen X was comfortable. Gen X had those terms. Well, many people probably feared being called gay or much worse things, so they didn't want to use those terms. So should we use these terms, these slang words, into our marketing efforts? Well, we know that they really hate it, but there's a few finite cases where you can. But there's a really important reason why you shouldn't. And I like to dub it the cool mom effect. Really, what it is a company tries to use some form of modern slang, and they end up creating a negative effect. They try and sound so cool and hip and modern, but they're late to the trend, or people just don't like seeing company use it. Now, I did ask them, these companies, an example of the word was yeet, Y-E-E-T, and it just means to throw with great force. Origins of that comes from Vine, which is predecessor of TikTok, if you want to use some kind of social media family tree. And I said, well, what if Coca-Cola said, when you're done with your can, yeet it into the recycling bin? And they said, I would hate that. But if a company used the slang, knowingly making fun of themselves for using it, it would be more okay. So maybe you have an organic tea company and you said, we're going to spill the tea on our process. That would be more acceptable because they're willingly making fun of themselves. But the big thing is that these companies that try and use this slang could accidentally offend people. Baby boomers really felt that it was excluding them. And Gen X was more fine, but keep in mind, when we looked at that population, when we looked at that workforce, majority of them there were those Gen Z and millennials. And of the consumer units, Gen X and baby boomer made up a lot, but you're then looking at 50-50. One part was okay with them. They didn't like it. They didn't hate it. Baby boomers just did not like the idea. So what companies can? Well, LGBTQ plus companies can. Because for them, it is slang from their community. It's normal for them to use it. So they don't really have any negative side effects. Now, we need to also, as we move into our next section, which is all about creating these ads, we need to talk about who's creating them. Data USA, which is a company that creates and gathers data about all kinds of stuff, said that the average age for a marketing manager is 42 years. This puts them into Gen X. And if we probably were to go up into those higher executives, we would probably see older age. Now, I'm not trying to be ageist here and saying that everyone's like this, but this is what research showed. So purely based off of my own research. We need to talk about diversity. Diversity is a huge thing right now because, as I said, we're having huge race issues in the United States right now, and diversity is among them. So my question posed to the survey respondents was, how important is different communities' representation to you? Now, I did not ask if they were a member of this community, but results are kind of clearly saying as to how important some of these are to them. When we looked at these results, we saw that Gen Z and Millennial really said, regardless of who it is very important that they are represented. Now, women in hijab was kind of moderate, and I think there is still a bit of hesitancy there. There was not the best treatment after 9/11 with Muslims in particular, so it's still something we're seeing emerge. But when we go to Gen X, we see that it's not so straight line. African American, it's moderate that they're represented, but extremely that the Latinx community is. Now, when I look at Baby Boomer and Gen X, I see something very interesting. It's both extremely important and not important at all. My results were nearly 50-50 on the ends. But for the disabled community, it was extremely important. Middle Eastern, not so important. And it's not at all important for women in hijabs to be represented. And only moderate for Asian. There's a lot of important stuff to see here. And when we look at intergenerational conflicts, we know, as we learned, that back in these older generations, LGBTQ acceptance was not high. So it makes sense that they're not fully comfortable with that idea. So, what does this mean for diversity? Well, diversity for Gen Z and Millennial is very expected from companies. Because to them, they say, this is what America is like. America is diverse, and it needs to be represented as such. Gen X and Baby Boomers grew up where there was issues with these generations, where racism was more common and less punished. So when we see issues like the women in hijabs, these people grew up with events fresh in their mind where anyone Muslim could have been a terrorist. When we see LGBTQ, it wasn't a comfortable thing for them. Latinx is also one of these things because these issues have become very political towards them. And so we know that things like LGBTQ is a hot debate in politics. We know that things like women in hijabs and the Middle Eastern people is such a politicized event for them, because it's less associated with who they are, but with what a small subset of that group did, independent from everything, from a terrorist act that wasn't really even represented by any part of their group, just a small group of people that wanted to do something very bad. So what does this really mean? Well, you shouldn't be throwing away diversity. Diversity is important. I think every company should be diverse. And I realize sometimes the societal objects and procedures we have in place make it hard to get diversity. There's, you look at lower income areas, the racial makeup of them, and you look at probably universities and racial makeup of those, we may see it's not as easy, but we need to know that diversity shouldn't just be an advertising tool, but should be a practice put in place. And, well, we should ask this. If we put something into place of representation of these communities, will we see an increase in profits? Now, it's not exactly a yes or no situation. Nike was a very good example of this. Nike has, in the past several years, been pushing boundaries. Colin Kaepernick, a person who protested the Pledge of Allegiance, not Pledge of Allegiance, national anthem, kneeled during the games, sparked controversy everywhere. The president, of course, got in on it, and they used him in one of their ads, and it was a huge thing. People burning their Nike gear, which really means nothing because they already bought it. So, when they introduced this job, it was meant to be a sports one for female athletes, and it was met with very mixed reviews. Some criticized and even tried to boycott Nike for what they did. And some people said it was supporting oppression of women. But others really were happy for Nike because they said, you're being so progressive in what's a small step. You move towards equality, diversity, and acceptance in this politically diverse time. And I remember when some of this was happening, people said it's oppression against women because of this head covering. And there was an argument that simply said, well, what about nuns? Nuns cover their head for their religion, but we don't call it oppression. Without getting into much debate there, we need to know that people are going to not agree on what's right or wrong in an ad, but we need to understand that diversity is important. I couldn't really find numbers on Nike if they went massively down or massively up. It probably wasn't a big change for them, or else we would have heard about it. Sometimes, though, as I mentioned in the case of LGBTQ, diversity is very important. A good example of this is Target. I got the privilege of listening in on a seminar kind of thing, talk by one of the marketing people that helped with Target's Pride Month initiative. For those of you that may not know, June is considered LGBTQ Pride Month. It commemorates Stonewall, which was a riot, if history remembers. It was back when you were not allowed to have LGBTQ gatherings in bars, and it's a big event, big in LGBTQ history. Target particularly had an incident where one of the owners of a store gave a large donation to an anti-LGBTQ group. People found this out and were not very happy because they said, hey, one of the people that owns one of your stores is giving the company money away to this company, to this organization. And so obviously you can't control, right, who a person gives their money to. But when it has that effect, just like when we talked about on influencers, the effect it has on your company, Target was a bit worried. So they said, let's give back. And they started Pride Month. And they started selling LGBTQ pride gear during June. They started giving money. And it's been successful. Now, don't get me wrong. It wasn't successful everywhere. Some places did not take to it. There are some places where the products were scalped, so no one could get any, and they were subsequently burned. I know when I was doing my study with the AAVE, the slang terms, I remember I talked to someone and they said, oh yeah, at my Target store, someone came in, a group did, bought all the Pride gear merch and burnt it. And he said it was the stupidest thing because they gave money to a company that was just going to get donated. So, but it's still, you know, the reasoning behind it. But as you can see, it was very important that this company was being supportive. And so while your company may not be in a situation where you're necessarily anti-LGBTQ, you're just not one way or another, it's beneficial to be supportive. And you don't have to be out and about super, you know, proud. And really with any of these communities, you don't have to be out there waving a rainbow flag. But you just need to be there and say, these people are Americans, they're part of America, and if that's who we're trying to reach, and if that's who we're trying to represent, we need to include them. So ad content is something else we've seen. If you remember back to the Super Bowl, Carl's Jr. had an ad. It was all about their new all-natural burger. And how do you advertise all-natural? Do you use green imagery and fresh fruits and vegetables? Well, yes, that's a great way of doing it. But Carl's Jr. decided, well, you know what else we celebrate being natural? Our women's breasts. And they used an actress who, there was, I think, long rumor that she was in the pornographic industry. She was topless, and she was holding 2 burgers, blocking her breasts. As you could imagine, that ad did not land well with people because it was borderline pornographic, and it was going on during a time when kids were up, when wives were with their husbands and they were ogling this woman that was on screen advertising burgers. And there's all kinds of talks about this. ABC, the news industry, talked about it, and they said it wasn't even clear until 28 seconds into a 42-second commercial what they were selling. And it's not about beef. It's not about a burger. It was to catch people's attention. We know sex sells. But when you're spending so much time on the sex part, you're forgetting what you're selling. And many people even said this was setting feminism back decades because they were treating the woman like a slab of meat to be ogled at. And this isn't anything new. Past commercials were like this. And critics started to create this hashtag called "Women Are More Than Meat." And it was literally about how they were using these women in advertising. And it's nothing new. We know that Calvin Klein, Mercedes-Benz, and all these others try and use this. And thankfully now we're seeing less. Call it the Me Too movement's effect. Call it society growing to learn to call out people. But we know that that kind of stuff doesn't work. So we now look at part of my survey, which was about if some themes were to show up in an ad, how would you feel? So we have mild profanity and hard profanity. Now, hard profanity, how do you define these? I typically say, if we say crap, that's mild. If we're dropping F-bombs, that's hard. So we saw that most people were fine with mild profanity. They're not liking it, but they don't hate it. Hard profanity, Gen Z and Millennial were fine with that. No on the Gen X and Baby Boomer. As you can see, really the only thing they were neutral towards was that mild profanity. And we see that sexually suggestive imagery, that's kind of neutral, and political themes, but they don't like non-PC humor. Non-PC, PC standing for politically correct, is anything that would not be right. So this might be slight sexism, slight racism, or exaggeration of a race, generalization of a race. So Asians are good at math, that kind of stuff. The only positive was dark humor, and I think this has a lot to say about Gen Z and Millennial. If you don't know what dark humor is about, dark humor is kind of jokes about stuff we don't joke about, if that makes sense. Death, suicide, depression, topics that we don't like to talk about, we joke about. And trust me, if you ever look at Gen Z humor, you will find a lot of them about killing yourself and about depression and all that kind of stuff. And we harken back to the mental health aspects. They are aware their mental health is horrible. A large line of jokes for Gen Z is about school shootings. And it's because that's their coping mechanism. So I do think there is a fine reason mild profanity is accepted. The commercial I like to think about whenever I looked at this result was Kmart. Kmart, I don't know many people who would say that's their favorite store, but I know many people who would probably say it's their favorite ad, which was the Ship Your Pants. It advertised shipping their stuff to store. And they decided, hey, there's one letter difference there. And you can ship your pants. You can ship your bed. You can ship your underwear. You can ship anything. And so they made an entire ad set. And they did 2 versions of the ads. And then later, they tried to play off their gas that they sell. And it was big gas prices. Obviously, say it fast enough and it sounds pretty bad. So people were more accepting of that. But, if it was an F-bomb they were trying to make fun of, wouldn't have gone over so well. So social media usage is also a big thing. We've seen as generations go, the usage of social media has increased, the types of social media have changed. Gen X and Baby Boomers, they had AOL and MySpace. Really, each generation has their dead ones, I guess I should say, because AOL and MySpace aren't particularly around. And Gen Z and Millennial actually had Periscope and Vine were kind of their 2 big ones. And so now we have stuff like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Pinterest, YouTube, all these other ones. So the question was asked, have you ever purchased anything off of a social media website? In my job, I place social ads, and I was very interested to see these generations, do they ever actually make purchases? So what we see lines up with usage of social media and age basis. So we can see that Gen Z and Millennials don't really buy much off Facebook, but a lot of Gen X and Baby Boomers do, almost 50-50. If we break down Facebook's user base, a lot of them are older. As for Instagram, we see the same. Gen Z and Millennials are more keen to buy. And Gen X and baby boomers are a lot less to buy. What's the primary age group there? Younger. What age groups of them were more likely to say, yeah, I listen to influencers? These younger ones. Twitter, a lot less likely. Few people bought off Twitter. Only a few ever purchased off LinkedIn. Only a few ever bought off Pinterest. And more people bought off YouTube. And again, where are those influencers at? And who bought more but those younger? Now, the other category had a lot of interesting responses. Some were kind of throwaway. For example, a fair amount of Gen X and baby boomers said, oh, well, I buy off of Facebook yard sale groups. Well, that's not really an ad, but okay. Some said, oh, I buy, subscriptions to an online newspaper. That's not really an ad. Again, I have to commend the honesty of these respondents. A fair amount on the Gen Z and Millennial side said, oh, I've bought stuff off of porn websites. I didn't know that classified as social media, but they felt it did. And a couple Reddit. A lot of people said Reddit they had bought off of. But ads on Reddit are very particular, so I didn't look too much into that. But we know that these break down into the primary audience. Pinterest kind of favors those middle-aged women, and we see that more women buy off, or more Gen X and baby boomers buy off of Pinterest. So we need to keep those in mind. And those newer ones you've probably seen, so Instagram, Twitter, I'd say probably YouTube, are those newer platforms, and they probably have that smaller user base of older. Although I'd say Twitter probably has an increased base now because of politics. Memes. So I brought this up because I've been asked before about memes and their usage. Merriam-Webster actually has the word meme in the dictionary, okay? I promise I am not making that up. So meme, according to Merriam-Webster, is an idea, behavior, style, or usage that spreads from person to person within a culture. Or, another description is, an amusing or interesting item, such as a captioned picture or video, or genre of item that spreads widely on the internet, especially through social media. To break it down in more of a simplified Gen Z term, it's a funny image or phrase. Now, should businesses be using memes? I will be very honest and say no. Memes are very, very tricky. There is a website called knowyourmeme.com. It is sort of a library of memes. They have 26,000 in their database. Memes change monthly, almost, sometimes by a week. It's based on what's hot in culture, what's going on social media, what's going on in the world. So really, it's hard to stay on top of them, and you'll probably be made fun of if you use them. And sometimes those ads, those memes, go political. So right now on screen, you can see two. This is the Chinese president, ZXI. I am probably butchering that. And over here is Vladimir Putin. Now, these are two memes that probably, if I was sharing these around in their appropriate countries, I'd get in a huge amount of trouble. Many people compared the Chinese president to Winnie the Pooh. China censored images with Winnie the Pooh because people were making fun of the president with them. In Russia, it's very fast and loose as to what you could have happen to you if you use a meme that makes fun of a public figure. So, it's a bit of a wild west when it comes to memes. So, be very careful. My advice, if you are going to use memes, choose formats that have popular characters. Okay? If it's popular culture, it's good. You have to be careful because you don't know the background of some of them. There is a very common one now, Pepe the Frog, that's P-E-P-E. Feel free to look it up on your own time. Used to be very, very popular. It was associated with the phrase feels bad man. And again, very popular. Thin white supremacists started using it. And it really faded out of popularity fast. So be careful. Okay? And that's where you need to research the meme. If it's not from pop culture and you don't recognize the character, please be careful. And if you want an idea of what is hot right now, go onto Reddit, go onto Instagram, and look. It doesn't take a lot of time, and it will prevent you from being laughed at because you shared a dead meme. So, let's look at two companies that have kind of harnessed a lot of what I talked about. So, I am from Kentucky, and Kentucky Fried Chicken, KFC, is a huge deal over here. But would you believe me if I said KFC is more popular in Japan than it probably is here in Kentucky? Well, they are. They are hugely successful in Japan. Around Christmas time, they are super popular in Japan because when they first moved over there, Christmas wasn't really known, and so they started, actually, back up. Foreigners that lived in Japan, on Christmas Day, they couldn't find a turkey, so they'd go to KFC, right? And they started to actually sell Christmas meals. It was a lot of money, okay, about $10, which I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but they started doing this in the mid-70s, okay? And they sold chicken and wine. I know, KFC selling wine. Sounds insane. That same dinner today, which now comes with cake and champagne, is 3,336 yen. That's $40. A lot higher than your standard bucket of chicken, right? So what does this have to do with being relevant to generations? On your screen, you see a very weird depiction of the Colonel, the mascot of KFC. You may think this is some weird fan art, some person's weird fetish. This is official KFC art. You see, one of the most popular types of games in Japan is dating simulators, where you get to date people. Yeah, that's a game. And many companies tried to enter the video game market before. Burger King being one of them. And yeah, their games did not turn out really good. They were bad, made fun of. But KFC's dating simulator, I Love You, Colonel Sanders, a finger-licking good dating simulator, has a rating of 9 out of 10. And that is on the platform Steam, which is a very, very popular gaming platform for PC. So, why? I think is the most common question people had. And that is because Japan is really popular in America. Japanese culture, anime, mangas, dating simulators are really increasing in popularity over here. And so they decided, hey, this concept of dating simulators is popular in Japan. So if you release in Japan, it's going to be a hit. People love the Colonel. America is now really loving this kind of stuff. So why not try and hit two birds with one stone and release this game? And it did really, really well. Now, a lot of people didn't notice this in the Gen X and baby boomer market because it wasn't mainstream. It wasn't on television. But it was just subtle enough that people noticed it. Now, on YouTube, a popular category is video gaming, and that is where people pretty much just play video games and record themselves. So one of the top creators, their name is Jacksepticeye, they're an Irish YouTuber. They have 24.7 million subscribers. All right, million. They were among that list of creators that decided to upload a video of themselves playing the game. Now, these creators, these video people, were not paid at all to make these videos. Okay, this wasn't a product placement. They just saw the game and were like, hey, that looks weird and cool. I'm going to play that. The top 5 videos alone, okay, top 5 on YouTube, the views alone total 4,246,000. That's just the top 5. The IGN trailer, that's a popular video game news site, the trailer for the game has 461,000 views. And what this game did was it paid homage to their extreme success in Japan. They weren't afraid to poke fun at themselves. And the thing is, I'm not 100% sure how much it costs them to develop this type of game, but it's probably a whole lot cheaper than a traditional TV ad. So we have to keep in mind that sometimes the best way to reach those younger generations are not the traditional routes we assume. Another company that does a really good job at this is Arby's. Now, when I was choosing case studies, I did not intend to choose 2 fast food restaurants. What happened is I found out that fast food restaurants were somehow a really good example because what they advertise on TV and in traditional media is a whole lot different than social media. So I decided that's where we should go. Now, when you think of Wendy's and social media, they're kind of known as being the top, particularly on Twitter, right? Wendy's is witty. They're always responding back to people, kind of poking fun. But I think Arby's is kind of the silent building group. They are making these really great strategy choices, and they're building a great audience. How and why? So on your screen, this is images of Instagram feed of theirs. And I can point out some very interesting things. So this right here on the left, that is art. All made out of their boxes, and that's their very, very big theme. It is of a game, Breath of the Wild. It's Legend of Zelda. Extremely popular. And it's just some art. If we look over here, we see some others, and some down here, like in the bottom middle of this group. This is made of their Arby's sauce. We see over here, it's made of deli meat. And there are all kinds of video game references and pop culture. In the middle here, I believe this is She-Ra. And I know this one over here is Spyro the Dragon, a very popular video game franchise. This is Borderlands. Down here's Fallout. All of these are really popular video games and pop culture icons. And by doing these, they are using hashtags. And when they do these hashtags, people are going to end up finding these images, and they're not going, Arby's is not going to have to pay for it, right? If I wanted to serve these images to an audience, I typically have to pay. Well, Arby's isn't. Arby's isn't paying a dime in advertising because people are either stumbling across these because, hey, I'm looking at Breath of the Wild images, maybe I want to buy the game, maybe I'm a fan of the game, and Arby's has a post that is there. Now, we need to understand that product placement is essentially what they're doing here. If I showed you some of these images, you may not immediately think Arby's, particularly this bottom middle one here, or this bottom left, right? Really this bottom row even. The Arby's logo isn't featured anywhere on it. But I mean, we know curly fries and that red sauce there, that is Arby's. Companies spend about $4.75 billion on product placement, and that was in the United States in 2012 alone. Okay, so they're essentially just doing product placement here, and you know that product placement cost, it's just a few seconds at that of having a product on screen. And even then, a lot of those younger generations are now becoming a lot more sensitive to it. I know a lot of people made fun of the Transformers movie because I believe it was Bose, or not Bose, Beats by Dre. Get my headphone company right there. They paid for advertising there, and people kept poking fun at it because they're like, obviously we know you paid. Same goes for Jurassic World. In Jurassic World, there was loads of storefronts, and companies paid to have their names put on there, and people were like, oh yes, it's the so-and-so, the Samsung, I think was the big one. People just poked fun at it because they're like, we know you're paying. And what this is it's a company doing free product placement on their own social media, which sounds insane, right? But here's the thing. It's very subtle because all of this content is stuff that people find interesting. It's art. It's unique. And it's something that they're more likely to share with their friends. For example, I may be more likely to send one of these images to my friends. Actually, how I learned about Arby's was my brother sent me something. And I personally loved it. I did. But we then fall into the idea of, oh yeah, this is Arby's. If I posted an image, you know, if I saw an image even of, you know, oh, there's a new 2 for $5 meal deal at Arby's, I'm not going to share that. But if it's something interesting like this, I am. And guess what? On their social media, they have posts like that of, hey, there's a 2 for $5 special going on. Hey, we have our new Jamocha shake. Such as this one up in the top right of this section. You can see that is actually advertising one of their shakes. So if you're looking through their social media, you're getting advertising mixed in that they, again, never paid for. So the thing is, you have to know your audience. Arby's really only puts this content out on Instagram. Again, when we talked about rough ideas of audiences, we know that Instagram has a younger audience. A lot of these references would fly over the head of those younger generations. Or sorry, of those older generations. Keep that in mind. So that's why this stuff, you only see it on Instagram. Now, you don't have to exclude them out. You know, that's kind of good. They do push some of this out on, you know, some of the same content out on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. But they tend to kind of move around. So maybe one or two of the ones in this grouping over here would show up on their other social medias. And that would be ones like maybe She-Ra and Spyro, because those older generations may recognize those characters, or their grandkids or kids might. And social media does not have to be strictly informational. You do not need to say, oh, there is a 2 for $5 special. We have a new 99-cent drink. No, it can be fun. And that fun content, that enjoyable content, is what gets those people to follow. It's what gets them to stay. So keep that in there. And, you know, so many people now are taking breaks from social media because there is so much news going on. They don't want to be talked at. They want to have something they can enjoy and talk about. Now, make your posts shareable. You know, what I mentioned is this. It's easy to share. Maybe you're not in touch with social media. What's going on Netflix? What video games are coming out? And, you know, hey, all you cool cats and kittens, make sure that it's relevant. You know, relevance is a hard thing to keep track of. What was popular a month ago may not be popular now. So some stay popular for a long time, some don't. So just keep that in mind. And utilize hashtags. Hashtags on Instagram and other places are a really, really great way to kind of keep in mind or to get into audiences, but it needs to be relevant. If this post here with The Legend of Zelda was tagged Legend of Zelda and it was just image of a, you know, sandwich, that's not relevant. It needs to be relevant to be there. It's not illegal. You're not going to get banned off Instagram, but you're probably going to get some very confused people. So as I wrap up, again, this is about a nearly 60-page paper, so if you want to take the time to read it to yourself, you absolutely can, and you will get the contact information for me. But I want to just kind of sum everything up in my conclusions. So this chart here was made in 2018. And I think it kind of shows a general bit of attitude. In here in the black, you can see the total billions of dollars spent on advertising. And our red line here shows how much we spent on digital ads. This has probably changed. And I think this shows a little bit of a downward trend. I think we're going to have a massive uptrend because COVID has taught us many people are online and we need to go there. So my conclusions are recognize that Gen Z and Millennials are similar, right? Our research showed us that, but they are different. Do not treat them the same way. They have similar aspects, but they are not the same person. Focus on promoting those short-term investments to the Gen Z group, okay? They are looking for that. Promote experiential learning in those classes. People, especially these generations in college, they want to know less about, well, here's what you'll learn in this class, and more about what you'll do, right? Big complaint about high school from these groups is, I never learned to do taxes. I never learned to balance a checkbook. So maybe you're talking about an accounting class. Well, hey, you're going to learn how to do a budget. You're talking about your science classes, you're going to have a lab. Nursing, you're going to get experience. You're not just going to be sitting in the classroom. This stuff is going to have a practical application. And as we said, if you're advertising something, a degree in particular, show how it's used. Show where it can lead you. Now, about diversity, make it regular. It should be less of a tool for advertising, but more of a staple of advertising. Never attempt to use slang in advertising. Gen Z or elsewise, keep your copy clean. There is no need to introduce very, very crass words. Keep in mind, we didn't have much positive. It was neutral. So if you don't include it, they're not going to hate you. But if you do, there's going to be negative parts. Memes can be used on social media, but keep it sparingly used. And make sure they are good ones and clean ones. And realize that different generations congregate on different social medias. This was the big thing from Arby's, right? They knew their audience on Instagram, and they knew it would not work well elsewhere. So I'm also going to go into a little bit of recommendations. I know I'm running long on time here, but I wanted to make sure I touched on everything. So I want to just quickly run through a little bit more in depth. Okay, so I'll break it down off of some of these since that's a little bit easier. Keep in mind about those intergroups, those millennials and such. Just because someone has a specific age does not mean they're going to fit that generational group. You need to do a little bit more. I would say that, that chart I showed, my research, could be applied to a majority of them, but it's not a fully applicable thing. When we talk about that experiential learning, that includes things like internships. Internships are a big, big thing. When we talk about using practical use for a degree, that's where your alumni stories come in. That's where you hone in hard. With that Gen Z slang, that's where you go in and if you're an LGBTQ company, or if you're going to make fun of yourself, we showed that making fun of your own self is really effective in the case of the Colonel. Keep that in mind. And with those different generations on social media, to break it down, and I don't have numbers to back it up, and I know that's a big thing, but I think if I were to go out and poll everyone, we would find very similar results. We know that Gen X and baby boomers really like Facebook, LinkedIn, and Pinterest, whereas those Gen Zs and millennials, they like Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, Snapchat, Reddit. And I also want to address what you might say could be the elephant in the room, which is there's two social media sites that are very, very popular I didn't talk about. And that is TikTok and that is Reddit. These two are very unique. Reddit has a wide age group. And I think it's probably the hardest to study, but the easiest, because Reddit uses subreddits, which are specific groups that come together around a specific interest. So it's not hard to understand where your audience is. If I'm looking for sewing, there's probably a subreddit for sewing. But the ages vary there. And it's really hard to get specific information from it. The other is TikTok. TikTok is a very complicated app, not in usage, but in terms of studying, because it's a very effective app for music. And I think that is probably my best summary of it, is it's really good if you're advertising music, but for brands, I don't think it's strong enough. And it's almost constantly having some form of controversy. Obviously, there was big controversy around the fact that it could get banned in the United States. I believe as of now it's banned in some country, I want to say Russia. They're banning it. And the trends can sometimes be weird. There was a trend of putting a fork in an outlet. I wish I was making that up. So I typically say TikTok, you need to be careful on. And a lot of the people that use it aren't American, aren't from or living in the United States. And I tried to keep it within the United States for this research. So thank you for being with me on this nearly 2-hour journey. I did not realize it would take me this long, but if you want to go through the whole paper, I cannot guarantee it'll be shorter than 2 hours, but you can find all of my references, all of the appendices, which has my research methods, the questions asked in the questionnaire, and the full list of slang terms in the appendix. And if you would like that paper, you can contact me. My full name is Corey Lee Mulliken, and the best email to get to me is corey.mulliken@kctcs.edu. That's probably the best. You can also get to me through my personal email, which is clm901@yahoo.com, or my EKU email, man of many emails, and that one is Corey_Mulliken3@mymail.eku.edu. And any of those will do. You can just ask me for access to it, and I will get you a copy. So again, thank you for hanging in with me, and I hope you found this informational, and I hope it may help you in your future. Thank you very much.